Today's episode is brought to you by WellPleased AV. Importer Mark Sosa has hand-selected a remarkable collection of high-performance brands like Inuos, QLN, Marison, Qualiton, Gigawatt, and more. Each of these specialist manufacturers are driven by engineering products that communicate the lifeblood of music. Check out everything WellPleased AV has to offer by visiting www.wellpleasedav.com. That's www.wellpleasedav.com. Today's episode is also sponsored by SCHIIT Audio. SCHIIT Audio designs and builds audio components in California and Texas. Based in Valencia and Corpus Christi, their wide line of amps, DACs, and audio accessories fit any budget, starting at $49. For a full rundown of all their products, visit SCHIITdotCOM or stop by their retail store in Old Newhall, just north of Los Angeles. That's SCHIIT.com. Today's episode is brought to you by Musical Surroundings. For over 30 years, Musical Surroundings has distributed high-performance analog playback equipment to vinyl enthusiasts and music lovers throughout the United States. Based in Oakland, California, Musical Surroundings represents world-class brands like Clear Audio, Hanna, DS Audio, and their own line of Musical Surroundings phono preamplifiers. To learn more about the exceptional turntables, cartridges, and analog accessories they offer, visit musicalsurroundings.com. That's musicalsurroundings.com. Hello, everyone. You have reached the Occasional Podcast, Season 7, Episode 4. We are actually recording this live at the AXPONA show in Chicago, Illinois at the Schaumburg Renaissance Convention Center. And I have two very good friends of mine from PartTimeAudiophile.com covering all the shows. Marc Phillips.
Hello.
And
I filled in that space for you.
Marc Phillips and Greg Neville. How are you, gents?
Doing great.
I'm fine.
So just to kind of give you a little background, Greg and Mark have diligently covered room-to-room show rooms. They went in, they listened, they loved, they hated, they observed. There's so much listening experience from so many rooms and so many systems and so many brands at the show that it's a really fun deal to kind of just sit down with everybody and go through the motions of contemplating what we heard, how it all sounded, and hopefully, with respect to everyone who was here who sounded good, crowning a winner, individual preferences, that kind of thing. Today's episode is also brought to you by one of the originals in high-end audio, Purist Audio Designs. Purist Audio Design made the first fluid-shielded audio cable over 35 years ago and still makes them today right here in the U.S. For over 35 years, Purist Audio has connected you to the music. They passionately make high-end, high-crafted audio cables designed specifically to the needs of your system. They list their specs, such as resistance and shield quality, and you can find them at PURISTAUDIODESING.com. Purist Audio Design is veteran-owned and available worldwide. So, to kick it off, Mark, what are your initial impressions of AXPONA 2022?
I think it is awesome that, we all feel this kind of universal feeling like the HiFi shows are back with AXPONA because it's run well, it's crowded, it's full of attendees, there's lots of rooms. It's just like the good old days when we used to do 5 or 6 of these a year, and I'm really, really happy to be back here.
Yeah, I've got a perspective from the 2019 AXPONA, and that show, I think, had more vendors and more attendees, but I think that the feeling that folks have for the show, for this one, there's a lot more excitement, I think, and the vibe is just more positive, I think, than what 2019 was.
So we were talking about this not too long ago, but that the summer CES used to happen in Chicago. And I was at the first AXPONA that was held in Chicago, and there had not been a HiFi show there for 15 years. And it was, the excitement was off the charts that there was once again a high-end audio show, that AXPONA had found a home. Because before that, AXPONA was jumping around. It was going to Atlanta, Jacksonville. I've been to a couple of them. And they found Chicago as a home because the people here wanted it so badly. So I felt that then, and I kind of feel it now. People are so happy to be back and doing this.
The landscape has changed. It's not like when we were duking it out with 7 shows a year, and it was like, I don't know, it's so much. There was a time when there was a lot of shows to cover, and we were crushing it on the PTA with all the coverage and stuff, but it was a lot, right? And correct me if I'm wrong here, Mark, but Eric Schuck and yourself at more than one show, you managed to go to every single room and deliver impressions for that. Is that correct?
That is correct. We did that multiple times, and we had a system, and we were down. We just had a list. We split it up, and we went for it, and we accomplished it. And it meant that we were doing 30, 35 reports each. But once you get in the groove of it, it's pretty easy to do.
I don't have that groove.
Greg, I don't feel bad. Neither do I, my friend. I don't even have close to a groove. I'm not even like a tiny little wrinkle. But I will say this: there's a lot going on. I want to kind of dive into some of the more impressions. And Greg, since we're kind of first time on the podcast, I'm going to let you go ahead and kick it off with what you kind of thought was really good, what you thought was okay, what your highlights were, and then go ahead and tell us what your favorite was. So take it away.
Sure. Thanks, Brian. There was a couple things that I thought were really interesting. One of the things that popped up was that there's a number of new vendors here that either haven't been around for very long or have never really been to shows. And some of the products that they had I thought were more compelling than maybe I was expecting. So that was kind of cool to see and hear and talk to some of those folks. But there were a couple things that were kind of cool, not necessarily the best sounds at the show, but still kind of cool. There's a Nelson Pass had the Beast of 1,000 JFET amps in the pass room, which is a little bit more of a story that I have to do some research on right there. But in its 20 watts of glory, it was kind of a nice, smooth pass sound. So that was kind of fun. I think that for me, some of my favorites of the show that really stuck out were the Avant-Garde room. So they are releasing their new flagship speaker, but not just their flagship. You kind of go in their side room, and they've got a nice, more moderate, midline system for there as well that sounded really good. And then the Rockport room, to me, it's like, how can you make a speaker sound that epic in a crappy little hotel room? So that by itself was kind of impressive. And there were some still points and some acoustic treatments and some other things like that kind of helped that along. But still, it was really impressive considering the venue. The Acora room had some really great tone to it. And when I came back to it a little bit later today, because I checked it out on Friday and then came back, and I think it sounds even better on Saturday than it did on Friday. So that was kind of nice to kind of recheck your ears and see what things do as the show progresses. And I don't know if they made any like tweaks or if they're just kind of letting things break in, but I thought it sounded better. Von Schweikert. Oh, go ahead.
Well, really quick is Sunday is the day, so I kind of go through and I pick my favorite rooms, but I always go back Sunday because then I can confirm, what I hear, because by that time stuff's been plugged in for 3 days and it's warmed up. And as an exhibitor, there were times when I had to open up a box on setup night for the first time, a sealed box, but by Saturday it usually starts sounding really good. And then Sunday, when people start leaving on Sunday, but that's when everything sounds the best. So Sunday is a very good day.
Right. Nope, I agree. And it was funny, as an exhibitor back in 2019 when I was working for some folks as well, and we had a DAC that it sounded best after 3 days of warm-up. That was just like, it was by design that way. So that first day when we were setting it up, it was terrible. But by the time Sunday rolled around, it was like, wow, this is sounding much different than what we initially did. So room is definitely an issue. But yeah, then kind of moving on, the Von Schweikert room kind of started doing the same thing. They've got their Ultra 7s, and they ran their new SEs in there for a little while as well, and that was fun and has a nice even tone. So those were pretty big standouts. I don't know, Mark, if you had anything on the VSAs you wanted to comment on.
They've kind of reinvented the exhibit room for high-end audio, and they do it like nobody else. And the system they walk in with is well over $1 million. But they have it down. They have a big team with the audio company, which is their dealer in Atlanta, and these are, you will never see a more professional effort to put together an exhibit room as these guys, and the result is in the sound.
Yeah, Leif and Damon were both commenting on how great it was working with those guys.
Right. And they always deal with a lot of issues in the show because they have to be so perfect. Yeah, because people expect it. They've raised the bar, and they keep raising it, even though it seems like they're going with smaller and smaller speakers.
So I in that note, though, I want to consciously and upfront say they sounded really good, but I don't want to think we're catering to this one brand too much at all the auto shows, because we have talked extensively about how great they always sound at every show.
Right.
So just know we try to listen to everybody equally, but these guys, like I said, they consistently produce. And if you really want to hear like more about the process of what they go through, we actually had Damon Von Schweikert on a few episodes back this season. He walks you through like some of the craziness that happens at shows, some of the problems with the room that they resolve and how they resolve them. But again, he's been on the show. I don't want everyone to think that we just like Google all the time over this one brand. We listen to everything. But it just happens that they stand out, and he was generous enough to come on the show. So that, I want to get that out there.
Yeah, there were plenty of other really great rooms too. Just down the hall from them, the Vinbergs were pretty amazing, and it was really fun for me because I really haven't listened to a lot of the same gear that Dave McNair has listened to, and so one of my goals at the show was to kind of hear some of the things that that Mark and Dave have been listening to and reviewing, just so I can kind of sonically get a kind of a roadmap of where they're at, where their ears are at. So it was really cool for me to listen to the Vinbergs and the QLNs, and also I did get a chance to pop into the Martin room as well, and so all of those rooms all sounded really good too. I think the Von Schweikert room, to me, sounded the most. That was my best of show from kind of a top to bottom, but I think that there were some very, very close rooms. The Avant-Garde room was really close; it was right there. And I think the Acora room was really close as well. So those really jumped out at me. Those are probably my top three. And then I think that Rockport room maybe came in at number 4, just for kind of what it could do in such a crummy environment.
I did want to kind of touch on another room that was impressive to me, and I think Mark might agree because we've already talked about this a little bit earlier today, was this QLN and Vinny Rossi room, right? So for those of you who don't know, there is kind of a theme, not always a theme, with Vinny Rossi and his room partners with his speakers where he used to run these Harbest in near field kind of arrangement. They're close. They're pulled away from the wall. First of all, the one thing he does is he runs them widthwise, not lengthwise, right? So if you enter the room, it's on the long side of the long wall, not the short side where the window is. And that's interesting of itself. It's not the arrangement most people go with. And then he pulls them really far away from the wall, and they're just sitting there right in front of a single line of people. So he only gets like 4 or 5 chairs in there.
Because you don't want to miss.
I don't know if you sat in every seat, but there's a little bit, the sweet spot is good, but like obviously the sweet spot in the very middle of the convergence of the two beams is the best, but it is what it is. But he has the QLNs this time. So he's done with the Harbest. He's moved on to QLN, and he had a new model of QLN. And I got to say, this model is very deep. This is like kind of, for a bookshelf styles, it is so deep that it is like almost defying. I think it's like deeper than it is tall now. But, talking with Mark Sosa and the distributor for QLN in the U.S. stateside, he's saying like this is what's necessary in order to drive crazy deep bass from a smaller shelf, and that makes perfect sense. And from what I heard it was kind of achieving that goal. What were your impressions on that one, Mark?
For me, I mean, the combination of the two, and I've reviewed QLN and I've reviewed Vinny Rossi, never together, which has always kind of been frustrating for me because while they're both great on their own, when they're put together, there's a synergy there that might rival anything else in audio. But QLN, I mean, Vinny did. Vinny had Harbez, and then he moved to, he actually had his own design that he did 1 year.
The
stiletto, and it was good. It was good. I mean, I reviewed the Prestige ones, and they're $6,800 a pair, and yet it seems to me like it's such a no-brainer to go with that because they're so good. I love two-way monitors, and I love big, expensive, fancy two-way monitors. The Prestige ones are something different. They're honest. They're priced fairly, but they'll blow your mind. The Vinny Rossi Brahma integrated, when he went over, he popped the hood on this thing. You can run it triode or you can run it solid state. The triode is, he's got Western Electric 300Bs in there, and it's amazing. But then he switches to solid state, and it sounds slightly different, obviously, but it's still really, really good. So it's an amazing product. And I was listening to this, and I said, he's got separates in the Brahma line. And a lot of it just has to do with the separates have twice as much power, and they're built a little bit differently because of that. So they do sound different. But obviously, I'm an integrated guy, and I'm a two-way guy, and I can't think of a better combo than the QLN and the Vinny. And I heard it this morning, and I still can't stop thinking about it.
Yeah, integrateds were kind of a bit of a theme, I think, for the show. There was a lot of integrateds that were pretty good that were kind of scattered throughout.
Yeah, definitely. The downside to an integrated over separates is that usually it shares a power supply. The shared power supply versus an extra set of interconnects, and the extra set of interconnects, it was a greater sonic compromise. And knowing that there's just so many companies that have figured out the integrated, and they're fantastic.
Yep.
And they save you space. And you don't have to buy, it saves you a cost of an expensive internet connect. That's why I like them.
I ran into Audio Research, Trent Suggs, and he talked a little bit about his new integrated that he's coming out with. And
Which
that
is gorgeous.
Yeah, it is a really cool unit.
Yeah, it's really pretty.
Really flexible, really targeted at a kind of more entry-level market to get into that, or Audio Research level. I think that they're going to be somebody to watch in the next year or two. They've got some cool stuff down the line.
Do you guys have another a nomination for best new product at the show?
Well, Luxman had a room with Magico. It was full Luxman rack, and it was a lot of new products. They have the new model blocks. And And that system sounded excellent, too, because, it just had just enormous snap and energy to it and detail, but also it's Luxman. So, and I've long maintained that Luxman is one of the great amplifier manufacturers in the world right now, that they've reinvented themselves a couple of times along the way, but right now they're making some of the best stuff out there. I think their preamp that they came out with a few years ago is one of the greatest preamps out there at all. But yeah, so they had a lot of new products, a CD player and streamer for about $10,000 that sounded really fantastic. They were playing Redbook CD, and it sounded amazing.
Mm-hmm. I love it when Redbook CD sounds great. It's so fun.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. I think that's a theme. I'm hearing that more and more. Even at home, I'm hearing this is Redbook, and it sounds fantastic.
Yeah, I think there's a number of reasons for that. But I heard the Luxman room too, and it had a really great presence and air to it that a lot of really kind of higher end rooms didn't have. Some of that kind of sparkle and air. Mm-hmm. So that was really impressive.
My experience with Luxman has been limited to a headphone amplifier that came out quite some time ago, but I've probably told this story on the podcast before, but I opened up the casework, and this was a huge unit for a headphone amplifier. It was ridiculous, but it sounded so gorgeous. And I opened it up, and it was completely filled with stuff. Sometimes you open the casework, and it's like the power supply's way over here, and it's just a cable, and it's all empty case. This thing was completely filled, and I don't know what it was doing because it was just a headphone amplifier, but it was absolutely amazing sound from that guy. So I can just totally see how they'd crush it. Other components done the same way. So yes, then you're right. A ton of new products to check out. There's some more information on the audio-head website too, with their release that came out a couple of weeks ago. If you're looking for more text and specs and that kind of thing.
Okay, so Sonor Audio, and you could talk to Eric Franklin Shook about, his love for Sonor. And he dragged me. It was right before COVID. He dragged me to show it to meet. I think it was Rocky Mountain, and I met Gunny, who is the designer for Sonor, and he had these small two-ways at the time, which he still has, and they absolutely blew me away with how balanced they were and how deep they went in the bass. They were fascinating. So he's got a new floor standing speaker. It's a 2.5 way, and it's called the Legato Duo, and it's 11K. So we're talking more reasonable territory here. If you ever go visit Gunny in his room, he is the most awesome DJ ever, because he will play all this rare stuff, and he's obsessive about music, and you will hear things you've never heard before, and they will blow your mind. And so the Legato Duo speakers, and he was just running it with a Hagel integrated, and he had a chord DAC, the Dave DAC, and a really simple system. But these speakers, and they look like they're slim floor standing towers, and they don't sound like it. They're really balanced, they're really smooth, and I will be getting a pair in for review quickly as possible. But if you don't know Sonor Audio, it's time to start. He sells everything he makes, so he's doing well, but this is a newer company, and you really need to get on this because he's doing fabulous things.
Yeah, I had some time to spend in that room too, and I definitely agree. It had a very nice sound that came through it, and the speaker is really raked pretty severely with the cabinet, which is kind of a very attractive, visually. But yeah, I agree. It was pretty good stuff with the Hegel and the Dave in there.
And on new news note, like new product and not released yet product, or not even really announced, but I think one of the big news items from the entire show, I would say, was Andrew Jones of ELAC and, of course, Pioneer fame has decided to join the team at MoFi. So MoFi is makes records, one-step records. They do pressings, this type of thing. They also are very closely tied with MusicDirect.com, which is a distributor, but they have their own line of products they've come out. I'm very vastly familiar with the turntable they make, the Ultra Deck. But the big news was that Andrew Jones is joining them to help produce some products for the MoFi brand of products, audio gear. And it's big news because, listen, Andrew Jones, I spoke to him extensively this weekend already, and he's a knowledgeable dude. He's pseudo audiophile famous, or maybe one of the more famous audiophile names out there in terms of people who cater directly to our crowd, our market. And he knows stuff, man. He's not just all smoke and mirrors. I'm like always amazed at his level of knowledge and his willingness to share it. He's not as secretive, and he's British, and he's polite, and he's a wonderful kind of figurehead that we have here in the audiophile thing to point at and say, this guy's pretty cool. We should listen to this guy. But he's known or really made his path for doing something that's not strictly high end. He's done high end. He worked with TAD, but he's made budget stuff with ELAC that's crazy good for the price. I've owned the EL5s. The resolution for that level, that price level, like, I don't know, by the end, they're not done, but the price on that kind of style drop till like $250, less than that. They just kept pushing it down with the same kind of crazy good resolution. But the truth is, we don't know yet. There's no formal announcement to what he's going to be making. My assumption, and I don't know if you guys want to help speculate here, nothing's been announced. We know nothing for sure, but we don't know if he's making big, tall, small. I mean, if we're looking at what they did with ELAC, there was a rollout in like almost a home theater thing where it's like, here's great, here's the middle, here's the lower one, here's whatever, but it was all centered around kind of a budget, mainstream, high resolution thing. What do you kind of think, Greg? Do you think that he's going to go budget first? We could take a nice gamble. Let's all gamble for a second here. What are your predictions for the price point of the first speaker?
Well, that's kind of an interesting one because I don't really think of MoFi as budget gear or entry-level gear. I think that they're really catering to a more audiophile audience. So, I mean, I don't think that he's going to go crazy, but I'm going to say somewhere between $2,500 and $5,000.
Interesting.
I think he's going to make something, a speaker that will be bought in a system with the MoFi turntables. So whatever the MoFi turntables run now, I bet you he's going to make a speaker that's made to go with them price-wise and make sense that way.
Interesting.
So kind of almost like a you put the turntable on top of the speaker as some kind of stand for an all-in-one type of system, or
No, I just mean that. Okay, so they have the two turntables with arms and cartridges, and maybe they come out with an amp. I don't even
they could be powered at that point, powered speakers maybe.
Well, hold on. That's a good point. They don't have an amp, so right now it's like
maybe they hire some other dude.
It's cartridges, it's turntables, and it's a phono pre, but they don't have an amp line. So you're absolutely right. There's something interesting there where they're going to have all the source.
They're going to want to have a MoFi system that people can buy from top to bottom MoFi. And so I bet you his first assignment is build a pair of speakers that will be purchased along with our turntables at their various price points.
So, yeah, I get that. What you're saying is that the price point will be around the same, or
right.
whatever you would consider to be the market of the current market they're already tapping into, which is I think, a pretty good guess, because what you're both kind of saying in a way is that it won't be another ELAC move. It won't be an ELAC competitor of a budget move that they're going to tap into the equity of the MoFi brand and what the consumer base they already have with. You're right, because their turntables are not $500. They're upwards of 1-2 kind of thousands, and they make a cartridge that's, I think, almost 1,000 or something of that nature. I'll have to look exactly, but you're right. This isn't the budget entry level crowd. It is definitely a little more of the connoisseur, and that's an interesting thing, because my thought was like, well, are they going to copy what ELAC does, or are they going to look to kind of reinvent and tap into his other areas, because he makes them all. He makes all that. He's made a price point. He's made his name making the budget. But like I said, from TAD, he has worked on stuff that's very high end as well. So
maybe he just, you have to ask the man, but maybe he wants to do something different, because every time he makes a move, it is very different. It's, going from TAD to ELAC, now MoFi. I remember he made that pair of Pioneer speakers that were $200 a pair, and they were amazing. So I think he wants to. He definitely has a recipe for making speakers that works and that doesn't cost a fortune to make. So he knows what he's doing. But I think the two MoFi tables are probably around like $1,500 for the one and maybe $2,500 for the other, and then you can get the cart. Yeah. I don't know exactly, but so you're talking about if you're going to spend $2,500 on a turntable, what would you likely spend on a pair of speakers? And I think that's what he's going to be aiming for.
And I think it's going to be at least similar, if not slightly more.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah.
Some people believe that you should spend half of your system budget on the speakers, but I've never been that. I always kind of go for everything costs around the same. The amp costs the same as the speakers cost.
Yeah,
and so I think that's more common.
Yep.
So maybe we're talking about $1,500 to $2,500 speakers, and that's a nice sweet spot that he might not have worked in until now.
Right, and I think also too, Andrew tends to change positions, not just to change positions. I think he likes the challenge of doing something new.
Oh yeah, you don't want to keep doing the same thing over and you get bored.
Yeah.
He's a creative guy, and I think he wants to do something completely new. And I think MoFi said, "Come do something completely new for us," and he said, "Okay," because it was a new challenge. And that's the people like Andrew Jones. Always are looking for the next challenge. They're not. They don't want to sit and do the same thing over and over again for 30 years. No, he wants a new challenge, and that's his comfort zone, is doing something new. So I think we'll be surprised what he comes up with.
Any other new products from Greg or Mark? Either of you guys have any new products that you heard that you like?
Actually, I did. There was a company out of Latvia, of all places. It's called, gosh, I'm not sure if I can pronounce this right. Aretai?
We're guessing Aretai.
Aretai, Aretai. They had a little two-way sealed box that was flat down to 30 hertz, which was kind of crazy.
Yeah,
and
they're an interesting company.
Yeah, had some great imaging and some punch, and a lot of excursion on the woofer, but it sounded pretty good. I was pretty impressed.
Cool. All right, Mark. Got any more favorites in your back pocket there?
And again, it's like the same people, they kind of show up and they know how to do. They've got their thing down and they produce good show at every show. And so that once again brings up Jeff Joseph and Nick Doshi. There's another synergetic match for the last few years. It's Jeff Joseph speakers and Nick Doshi, and they have a tape machine because Nick Doshi makes the tape preamp. That's a partnership that's lasted for a long time. And Jeff Joseph he's kind of like, how Vinny has a strange placement for the speakers. Jeff Joseph sometimes will do the same thing, a really strange diagonal positioning, which I always love diagonal positioning if you can do it. And I'm so familiar, and I've heard Jeff Joseph speakers so many times, but I can't deny the fact that that's my sound. That makes me happy. So, and I haven't seen Jeff. I know Jeff pretty well, and I haven't seen him in a couple of years. It was I reviewed the Pulsars 2 or 3 years ago, and they were just spectacular. And he had the big Pearl 3s. So he doesn't have anything new, but it doesn't matter because his basic designs are also good. The perspective is amazing, and the Pearl it's fairly petite for a flagship speaker, but when you listen to it, you're like, there's no doubt in your mind. Jeff Joseph has always been really good at getting the bass right in his speakers. Even the Pulsars are extremely good on bass response.
I agree, because for years, the Pulsars were the ones where I was like, this speaker just feels like it's got all the information across the entire spectrum. Just the big sound, it's a cliche, right? But big sound from small speaker, that was the Pulsar to me. That was years ago.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's, the Pulsar, we actually did a room share with them once and gave them a big, expensive integrated, and they never sound better than they did with the Pulsars. The Pulsars, if you match them up with the right components, even though they're small two-ways, they'll go with anything and they'll sound great and they'll put out the bass. And they have a really nice warm balance that I really enjoy too. So it's kind of like, okay, Mark's saying, Jeff Joseph again, but it's facts. It's just great stuff that I love to listen to.
These are facts, people. These are facts, people. Don't mess with the truth.
These are the facts. Just the facts, man. The other interesting one, and Grover Neville is going to take them on, is everybody's familiar. I mean, most people are familiar with Rhythm, and that's, it was always a single driver, a full range single driver. Well, they have a new line out, and we got to hear, I think it's called the Avka, and it is basically a Rhythm monitor that has 2 amps. So you have the 1 amp, it's a tube amp. There's actually a tube sitting right on the front baffle and a little shelf on the front baffle. It powers that single driver, and then it's got a subwoofer out back, and there's a solid-state amplifier that drives that. And so they just had this tiny little HiFi. It was just a little DAC streamer preamp, and so it's this tiny little unit on a pedestal with these really kind of extravagant, almost industrial-looking designs, and the sound is different. This is single driver stuff. This is, louder and whizzer cones and that kind of thing. But this sounded really interesting. It's different, but it's interesting.
I agree. I was in that room too and chatted for a while. And, that little 25-watt hybrid tube amp that they've got playing on the upper mid-range, and then the beefy 100-watt on the subwoofer, for the size of the box, it went pretty deep, and it had some sparkle and imaged okay, and had a nice soundstage. It was interesting.
Yeah, Grover is arranging for a review. I mean, they really kind of tickled his fancy. He heard them, and he liked them a lot. So we should be seeing a review of the Rhythms pretty soon. I think the show sounded really good as a general. Sometimes you go to shows and it's just everybody's having troubles with the room.
One of the brands that I kind of ran across that was actually showing in several rooms, which I thought was really interesting, was Borison. And I believe the electronics for that are ANSYS?
ANSYS,
something like that.
And with Avik.
Yeah, and Avik. It's all the same company, and it's all in-house design from top to bottom. I went into about 2 or 3 of those rooms with different systems, and they all, I thought, sounded pretty compelling. Had some interesting things. They're certainly not inexpensive, but, we're at an audio show for high end. So, so I don't know, Mark, if you've gotten into any of those rooms or not. I know that not all of the opinions that we didn't share opinions on everything on what we thought.
Oh no, and like Scott and I,
liked.
it's actually surprising me more and more that Scott and I started off years ago liking pretty much the same stuff, but we've gone off on different tangents. He has some definite opinions that are different than mine on this specific show. I'll give you another one really quick, and you're going to hear more about it from PTA. Is Credo from Switzerland? They make speakers. And Dave McNair just got a pair of the big speakers. I'm getting a pair of real slim floor standers that are called the EV1202. And so I went to the Credo room, which is, again, it was a big room, and their top-of-the-line model, which is a huge line array. And I usually don't respond to line array speakers, because I'm a two-way guy. But this was a really good sound, and I'm really looking forward to getting the Credo into the house. They're coming like in a couple weeks, so I'm looking forward to it. They're really good.
And I want to give a shout out to the harp player that was in the lobby.
Oh yeah.
Does anyone know the artist's name? I feel a little guilty that I passed it twice, but I didn't take the note down of who she was.
You should buy one of her CDs then.
I think she was also. Was she also selling vinyl, or was that just a poster?
No, that might be. Well, Anne Bisson is selling vinyl at the show.
Okay.
And so she's kind of fixed. You'll see her at a lot of shows selling her vinyl, and the sound quality on her records is really, really good, really special.
And I actually would like to throw in one of my favorites. I went by the Orlick room, who was doing a little bit different, a little bit twist this time with ATC. He's playing some jazz and some classical, and I was like, you know what? Stuff really hits with the dynamics, hits with the micro details, and a lot of good stuff like that. So I was very impressed with that, but I'm usually impressed with that. But he switches. He usually, it's usually the Orlick room, and then he takes out the speakers and kind of switches it up quite a bit. He's had 5 to 6 different brands that he partners with, but this one gelled nicely, and I think that the ATC is a bit of an unusual thing because they do the pro stuff and they do the audiophile market, and it's just a nice kind of. I think it had a nice audiophile feel to it, even though they're a pro kind of speaker. The dynamics and the snap was like, pow. So kudos to them. Good sounding room.
And I'll give you one more newbie. It's not a newbie to me, but it's Audio Thesis. That's Derek Skipworth, Skip. And I recently reviewed the Rosso Fiorentino Pienza speakers. I didn't get to listen to him with the Norma Electronics that he also sells. And he carries those 2 Italian brands mostly because they have a great synergy with each other. So I'll dare to say that he was getting much better results at the show with that pairing than I did when I reviewed the RFs. I thought he had really great sound.
And I want to also give a shout out to SVS because they do a surround sound system, generally speaking, with the TV, which is also somewhat unusual. But I have to be honest, the crowd going into there was insane. So they had a room that was actually a little further off the beaten path, and there was I couldn't get in there. And it's like the only other person that drives a crowd like that generally is Andrew Jones when Andrew Jones is presenting. But the SVS guys, they were bumping a Mission Impossible. One of the Mission Impossibles playing like a very good clip. And I was just kind of like, damn, this is fun because they had a great bass and the people were eating it up. And I was just like, I don't know if they've always had that kind of thing. I think they've always had a good response, but like to not get into the room for multiple tries, I think it really speaks to their presence as a brand. The fact that they are a subwoofer company, they make Prime Towers is their floor stander. They do wireless. They do a couple of great products, but honestly, in the pandemic, I think they've really thrived and really grown as a company. They're much bigger than they were just like 10 years ago. I said some time to talk to those guys in the hallway, and they have seen real growth, but also like it shows by their draw. I mean, this is an audiophile show, and these guys are 100% audiophile, but like the surround sound system is by far very unique to demo it that way, and it was just like line out the door. I thought Andrew Jones was in there again. I don't know, Mike. I thought you were with MoFi. I do want to give a shout out with the MoFi room specifically because they have this pretty cool HiFi Rose company that's a little new, at least new to MoFi, and their distribution of it stateside again. But they have this front-facing, full LED display media server that HiFi Rose kind of like, I don't know if it's their first product or not, but they cut their teeth with it in the US, start seeing it pop up. It's kind of a genius idea. It's like a full-size component, but the whole thing is display. So you can really see what you're looking at from a distance. Just a simple thing. Sounds great. They are throwing out another wrinkle at the show, and this is an integrated amplifier that has what their marketing speak is calling a Class AD, which means it's not a real thing as far as I know. It is just Class D, but they want you to because we all know, right? Class AB is a thing. Saying it's Class AD is unfortunately just a marketing term, but it is a Class D amplifier with GaNFET, which uses this new chemical and this new thing that's kind of a hot item right now. So it's cool. It's interesting. It's $7,500. It's not even out yet, but it does 200 watts into 4, and you can bi-amp it. Who knows? Are you guys getting that in? Because I'd be interested as heck to hear what that thing sounds like. Because I don't have a problem with Class D personally, but I think it's easy to acknowledge that Class D, in a traditional sense, hasn't really been the topology of choice for audiophiles historically. Obviously, Class A people I like. Class AB is more practical and a little more common. So this Class D, this is stab at Class D, is a new twist on that idea, and hopefully it sounds badass because it looked cool and it had pretty cool, like, has this gear. All this is like a steampunk vibe to the volume knob. So
yeah, it's kind of interesting, Brian. I kind of felt the same way about Class D for a long time, and then I read Dave McNair's title review on that Class D amplifier, which he really, really enjoyed, and kind of changed maybe my opinion on what is possible with Class D. I think it just takes a lot more work and some technical savvy to make it happen. So I think we'll be seeing more and more Class D as time goes on, partly because it's so efficient for bass-powered, subwoofers, and a lot more speakers are just powered, and Class D just is so much more efficient and a way to go.
And you can have a 500 watt per channel amplifier that weighs 8 pounds.
Right, right. So, I reviewed the Warp 1 a little while back, and when I got the box, I literally thought somebody sent me a preamp.
Right. Class D is unusual. I've done 3 Class D amps so far, and it's changed my mind. There are possibilities. Jeff Rowland told me it's only one tool in his toolbox, and that it isn't so much the plug-in module, whatever you're using, it's what you surround it with in the signal path that makes the difference. And that's why we're hearing really good Class D, is because it's not just about plugging in a module, it's about doing things around the module that's going to make it sound even better, especially in terms of filters and that sort of thing.
Yeah, so I think that Class D has a way to go to fully mature, but I think it's getting really close.
Well, I'm sure the title is the title is I think $28,000, so it better sound good. But but I'll trust Dave on that one.
Listen, guys, I want Class D to sound good. I'm not one of those audiophiles that's like, no, it's never going to sound good, and I don't really care. The efficiencies, like we just said, in size and heat dissipation are advantageous, right? That's why it's been used in so many other things. I want this stuff to sound good. And so that's why I think it's definitely noteworthy. And let's get this going because we could use smaller sizes and less heat. I don't know about you guys, but I prefer I want a tiny, tiny box, like the size of my thumb, to do everything. Just the jacks, please. That's all I need underneath. My last shout out is a new amplifier from because I don't want to leave personal audio in the dust. There was the Ear Gear Expo here. Some excellent sounding stuff. Periodic Audio was there. Audaz's was there. For those who are really into headphones, there is a fine selection. In a room on the 4th floor, Woo Audio, who makes high-end tube amplifiers.
I used to own one, yeah.
Yeah, and they make some reasonable priced ones too. I think they have full-on, beautiful-looking, built like a tank.
Right.
For under $1,000, just under $1,000 for some of their cool stuff. But now that being said, they make the high end. They've even gone so far as to make mono blocks for headphone amplifiers. Not at this show, but a more realistic or relatable or transferable or not quite portable is their WA. They have a 33, 22. Those are the balanced configurations. But the 23 Luna was on, which is a variant of their WA33.
they have this potometer. The volume knob is an Alps RK50 pot. And for those who don't know, this is like a really premium pot. I don't even know the price, but it's ridiculously expensive as a part. It's using another Sony amplifier. Because you know what? They're not working with a whole lot more on the personal audio amp side. It's like if you got a good volume pot, then hell, something to work with, right? It uses 6 C45s and 2 A3 and has one rectifier that's a 5U4G. And Woo Audio winds their own transformers, which I think is a nice touch. Not everybody does that. So they have really tight control of that. 9K, and this guy is a single-ended version of the WA33. So the WA23 Luna, beautiful tube amplifier, $9,000. So not for the faint of heart there, but if you're into that kind of thing, it also acts as a preamp, I guess. So there's a little added bonus there. That's all I got. Overall, the show for me, like we already kind of touched on, was a high energy experience. There is a sense of camaraderie among the people and a sense of celebration to be out of the house, to be along with the people that are of the same mind of you. And, you know, the audiophile, our clan, our little clan here in the world isn't exactly something that everyone I feel like can talk to another person about. If you stop someone on the street and start talking about sound quality, you might get a strange look. But here, you will not get a strange look. You will likely get a very educated response to your hobby, and I think that's a wonderful part about it. The conversations I've overheard were by far interesting and just really in-depth kind of information sharing. You know, like I said, there's a lady playing the harp. There's a good vibe. There's been no fights that I saw.
No.
And so it's good to be back, guys. It's good to be back for me. I don't know what Greg, you kind of took away from it, but that was my vibe.
Well, I mean, a couple of things. I kind of agree with you on the vibe, for sure. People were excited to be back. We had so many starts and stops on potential shows with COVID going on that it was like, oh, everybody would get excited about a show, and then the case numbers would start going up, and everybody got kind of wishy-washy about it, and then the show would kind of die. So this is really our first big show in,
I would say,
maybe what the
big,
new
successful
norm is. Yeah.
You know, running like before COVID.
Right.
Yeah.
That's kind of the key. It feels like old times, right?
Right.
Feels like old times. This is what we used to love doing.
Yeah. And then so kind of the other flip side of that was that I also think that vendors have figured out what they have to deal with acoustically at this hotel and this convention center. And I think that just the bar on what the sound quality was in so many of the rooms is so much higher than what it's been at past Exponas in Chicago. And that's really encouraging to me that, you know, some folks have kind of brought a little bit of treatment, you know, some corner things, some other acoustic panels and whatnot to make the room sound better. But there's also plenty of rooms where people had no acoustic treatment and they still were getting good sound. Mm-hmm. So that was really encouraging to me that people were figuring it out how to really get a good sound out of this venue.
I think that the high-end audio industry is extremely close-knit. I don't know if everybody understands that we love doing shows because we all get together in one place. And we're friends, and these are our friends, and we love what we're doing. And, you know, close relationships form. And we've missed that over the last 2 years. And that's one of the best things is we're seeing people that we haven't seen in a couple of years that we used to see several times a year. And it's so wonderful that we can see each other. There was a point on Thursday night where in an 8-minute period, it was like I ran into everybody I knew. And it's just the emotion was out there. And I think this show will be remembered just for that, the emotion, the feeling of like reuniting a family. And that's kind of what we are in the high-end audio industry.
The Occasional Podcast is a production of the Part-Time Audiophile Network. which includes parttimeaudiophile.com, The Occasional Magazine, the PTA newsletter, and audiohead.com. You can stay in touch with us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. The Occasional Podcast is produced and hosted by Brian Hunter. Executive produced by Scott Hall at PTA Productions. If you haven't already, please subscribe to The Occasional Podcast on iTunes, Google, Spotify, or wherever your favorite podcasts are downloaded.